This is Aidan Khus playing in the finals of a 1400 player regionals with Lost Zone box. And this is also Aidan Khus talking with me about how to play Lost Zone. Aidan has been playing Lost Zone decks for over a year and with great results clearly knows Lost Zone box as much as anyone else. In this video we'll be going over how you play every single matchup in the format for Lost Zone box, but to start we're going to talk about how to build the perfect Lost Zone box deck list. Enjoy this Lost Zone box guide. Alright, Aidan, I'm going to ask you about Lost Zone box, and let's talk about it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the deck list. So I really just want to ask you what your process is of building a deck list like this, and how you got to this, and then we'll talk about, obviously, your inclusion. So how'd you build this?
Okay, so playing a Comfy deck, I knew I didn't want to really be playing the Paradox Mons. I've tested a lot of Turbo, so Turbo just wasn't hitting for me. It has a really bad Gardevoir, not very good Charizard matchup, and I needed a way to fix those matchups, and that's where the Mawile came in. Originally, I was playing one and a Lost City. The Lost City was for the Manaphy and the Jirachi, but eventually that Lost City ended up getting cut just because in favor of Pokestop. Pokestop is how the deck functions. You need to get to that Kyogre really fast, especially whenever I played this deck first in Charlotte. Miraidon was a lot more popular than it was in Knoxville, so I needed to get to the bottom of my deck a lot faster compared to most of the matchups that I hit at Knoxville. So I favored the Pokestop, and the Mawile was at a count of 1. And I just wasn't feeling like I was beating Zard enough because they still played the Lost City. So that's when, before Charlotte, I put in 2 Mawile, and that's where the difference between my Charlotte and Knoxville list came in. Is instead of the 1 Jirachi, I played 2 Mawile just so I would beat the Charizard matchup. Obviously, after Charlotte, stuff changed, the meta shifted. Azul's YouTube video came out, and Azul pushed the propaganda of cutting Lost City and Charizard. So then I thought it was completely safe to go down to 1 Mawile, and you still beat Gardevoir and Charizard just as efficiently. And the Jirachi helps your Sablezard matchup and Lost on Mirror substantially.
Yeah, sure. So yes, you touched on Jirachi. I'm just going to go over a bunch of like these small changes within the list. So for a while we have only seen really high accounts of energy in the deck. In this deck specifically, this one's only at 10 energy. Most of the time it's been at 11 and 12. How do you sort of manage being at 10 energy, and do you think it's correct for this list like this, and why do you think it's correct?
I think it's correct, especially now. Because most matchups you don't really need to Kyogre for more than 4 energies. Obviously you want to, but like against Mew, you don't need to at all. Like you only need 4 because the Genesect only has 190 HP. So only 4 energies will get you there to take your 4 prizes to win the game. After you take another 2 prize knockout at some point in the game by either via Greninja Sableye or Dragonite on a 2 prizer with a counter catcher, or just like Dragoniting them before they can evolve. Against like Miraidon, you sometimes need the 5, but like if they bench Mew and Squawk, both of those Pokemon are really easy targets. And also if you just Sableye at any point in the game, you can set up some math. So I mean, like having the 10 energies, if you get a little unlucky loss of decisions or prize cards, it can punish you a little bit, but I think for the pure deck conservation, it allows you to play so many more things in your deck that helps it function to a better ability.
Yeah, sure. So, and then that makes a lot of sense. And I think another thing with your list, I think the main things are like, you have this Roxanne, you don't have Echoing Horn, and you've cut the 4th Nest Ball and a few other consistency for like the 1 Pokegear. I think if you can just run through all of those and why you made those choices, that'd be great too.
Yeah, I know for sure that like the Azul group was like big on the 4th Nest Ball. I think the 4th Nest Ball is great too. Obviously it didn't make my list. I didn't feel like I needed it for the deck to function. I'm a really huge fan of the Pokegear. I just think that it helps the deck substantially. I mean, ultimately, in any Lost Zone deck, you need to find Colress. And if you don't find Colress, then you're not really playing as much as you'd like to. And I just wanted to find Colress as much as I could. And especially even if you are finding your Colress in the late game, the Pokegear is extremely good. Because while you're popping Pokestops, you're obviously milling your supporters. And whenever you get to that low deck that Kyogre does always towards the end of the game, Power Pad plus Pokegear is essentially a Luminion for any supporter that you would like to in your deck. And you get to build up your gigantic hand. And the only decks that are really disrupting you are the ones that you use Mawile in, which is Gardevoir and Charizard. And then like the Mew matchup is already really good just because you only have to attack 2 times to win the game. At the minimum, 3 times at most. Echoing Horn is... I know the Azul group decided to play that one this week, and that was one of our card differences. I think Echoing Horn's really good. It's a cool little cheesy card that a lot of people won't expect in your deck, and it'll come up and win you some games. I just couldn't find space for it. It's not a card that contributes to the consistency of the deck, and whenever I build a deck, I really want it to work. I prioritizing the strategies in the deck to work and the deck to function more than anything. And if I could fit these extra cool cards that can eventually win me games, then that's cool. But if not, I would much rather play cards that help me play the game.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't think there's much else to talk about within this list specifically. I think maybe comparing to like maybe the Glasses builds or Sablezard, why exactly you think this is better? And do you think this is better going this is the better deck to play going forward as well? What do you think about those?
I definitely think that this is one of the better decks to be playing forward. The Moon matchup's really good. Obviously your Guardy and Charizard matchup are going to change because they might play a little bit more switch cards, just because my deck did see as much success as it did this weekend compared to Charlotte. I definitely like the majority of the other matchups other than Gardevoir and Charizard maybe. So I think that there's enough to warrant this deck still being played. Whether it should be like a very high percentage of the meta, I don't think so. But I definitely think that if you're gonna go with Kyogre, I feel like my deck is almost one of the better ones, just because it's so straightforward and consistent. And I feel like there's less clunkiness in this one than there is in most of the other lists that I've seen floating around.
Yeah, cool. It makes a lot of sense. Alright, so now time to get into the guide for the deck. So the first thing I ask everyone that I do matchup guides with or anything like this is, what are you going first and second again? I think the main ones would be maybe Gardevoir. Which ones are you thinking you are going first against? Maybe obviously a second heavy deck most of the time, I would imagine, but yeah, what do you think?
I think for sure if you're like, you don't know what your opponent's playing going into the match, you're just gonna blind up second in like every single match, just because majority of the decks in the format want to go second. Your deck doesn't suffer from going second, so obviously you're just going to want to go second and try and hinder the ability to play the game. And also you could get a couple cheeky dunks if you like ever have the opportunity to. But there are, if you know that your opponent's playing Chien Pao, Gardevoir, DT, Mew, even Goldango, you want to opt first, just because their deck obviously wants to set up on their first turn. There's no advantage that they gain from going second, so it's just so you just rather go first and like hinder their ability to play, especially against like the Chien Pao and the Guardy, because it just allows you to have more time to get cards in the Lost Zone via Comfy to set up for a Greninja play on the next turn, just because they can't bench that mana fee because it's gonna get Maul Wild.
Cool, yeah. You covered it. Alright, let's get into the first matchup. Charizard EX. So what are you doing to beat Charizard EX? Maybe play into Mawile, and even if they have something like, let's say, Turos, or you don't have access to Mawile, then how do you play this? I think both situations are important to cover.
Yeah, so how I would... I mean, obviously, I'm just using the Mawile, like, as of this weekend, just because Charizard decks are never playing more than one switch card. The Azul list has gotten really more popular, and that just only plays one switch, no Lost City. So you're just going to be trapping the entire game. They have to bench their Pokemon. It's just so hard for them to play the game if they don't bench any of their support Pokemon, such as Rotom, Mew, because they have to get 3 Charmanders out and like none of their Pokemon that can get trapped. So it's just really difficult for them to set up that way. Especially if you can opt second in the game, it's just really hard for them to play. And you have access to Greninja, you have access to all of your Pokemon that you would normally not if they had a Manaphy or Jirachi in play. And I'd say if they do play the Turo, or multiple switch outs, or the one Lost City, then the best way to beat it is just to try and just hit. I mean, you can use Mawile on the active Charizard EX to hit with Dragonite and one-shot it. I mean, it's technically a 2-shot, but that's like one of your plays. Obviously, you could slide the little TM Devolution in your deck, and that helps the matchup significantly. There's definitely ways to play around it. I wouldn't say the matchup is favored if you're not Mawiling them, but it's definitely not the worst matchup in the world.
And then how do you play if they have TM Devo? You only have like a few Gust cards, so you either going with Dragonite, or you think just if you're playing with TM Devo, maybe just Sableye, Cram. How do you play it?
Yeah, I think like if you have the TM Devo in your deck, you're gonna be Sableyeing, you're gonna be cramming, you're gonna be trying to set up that math. I mean, you're gonna make them obviously game one. You're gonna try and gain as much information as you'd like from their deck. Whether it be you're gonna try and Mawile them, make them show the 2 switch outs. If they have the 2 switch outs, then maybe you adjust your play going into game 2. But I mean, like, playing this deck, you're gonna have to learn how to adjust on the fly. There's not a straight game plan that you have for like decks that aren't normal. You make your game plan for deck lists that you think are the most popular in the meta right now. But if they play cards that can hinder your strategies, then you're gonna have to adapt on the fly and change up your play a little bit to try and overcome that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, obviously Charizard, pretty straightforward matchup with Mawile. So I think the next matchup, Giratina Lost Zone, is a lot more complicated. What do you think are some key tips to beat Giratina?
Yeah, I think that Giratina is one of the more fun matchups to play. It really depends if they play a Manaphy or not. I know Vinny didn't play it, so Manaphy was kind of on the low this weekend. But if you do hit one with a Manaphy, that's whenever it actually gets really interesting. Because if obviously if they don't play Manaphy, it's really hard for them to play the game with just one prizers, because then you could just Sableye and you have Manaphy and Jirachi, and they usually don't play Jirachi, so you kind of just like win that prize trade for sure, and you never have to go down into Roxanne. No matter what you do, going down into Roxanne is always painful. You never want to do it. Sometimes you can do it when you have multiple attackers set up on your board, but you're going to be usually Sableyeing your Kyogre to try and get around that prize card mark, try and win the game before you go down into that low prize territory where you could get Roxanne. Yeah, the no mana fee, Kyogre, 2 Giratina V-Stars by setting up Sableye damage, taking 2 prizes, pretty easy game plan, and then you just wipe their board. They do play the mana fee. You can sometimes take one. They always have to take prizes. It's really hard for them to spread damage around and win the game by taking multiple prizes. So they're going to go down to Roxanne territory. They don't really have much of a choice there. So you can actually Roxanne them the turn that you knock out their Manaphy after you've been setting up for a Kyogre turn. And then if they have Rod Nest Ball, you kind of like either extend the hand or you have like one more turn. Or if they have a Roxanne of their own and it just hits you and you're not able to draw out of it, then they can win the game as well. But off of the 2 cards that Roxanne gives them, the odds of them drawing that are probably very low at that point in the game. Yeah, especially you win if you're able to stay at 4 whenever you Roxanne them. Like you go kill Manaphy, stay at 4, and then you could Roxanne them again. So
Yeah.
It's definitely, there's definitely a lot of play that you have, and I feel like that they get to play the game a lot less than you do.
Yeah, fair. Okay. Next matchup that we're going to talk about is Gardevoir. Gardevoir, a really complex matchup for Lost Zone Box. I think there's definitely 2 ways to talk about it, obviously with Mawile and without. I think the main thing, so quickly talk about how you play with Mawile, forcing Manaphy off, and then a lot of them, I think a lot of Gardevoir lists are going to be trending towards Turos right now. So then how do you play when they have Turo?
Yeah, I mean, I actually don't even think you need a Turo to beat the decks per se. I think the Turo definitely beats it. But I think if you're just really smart and you play the game really well, if you have a Cresselia, that should be pretty much all you need. I mean, obviously, if you get blown out in the early game, there's not much you can do about it. But like with the Turo, I mean, that should just seal the game.
I mean, but how do you play it from the Lost Zone side? Even though maybe it's bad, what are you trying to do?
Yeah, from the Lost Zone side, you're pretty much always gonna try and Mawile. If they show the Turo, that's cool. But usually if they know that you play Mawile, they're not going to bench those Pokemon that could get trapped. And I think at this point in where the format is, they might play more like that quite often, just because they don't know if you're playing Mawile or not. So they don't want to lose the game on the spot. So you're going to be trying to aggressively Greninja. It really comes down to, do you get that second Greninja turn after you Greninja them once? If you do, you usually win the game. If you don't, then it's pretty close, and it comes down to, do they bench a Pokemon that could get trapped or not? And you can always set up Kyogre too, because they just don't have the ability to bench Manaphy. And if they do have the Turo, it's kind of one of those matchups where you just like, you have to take a bad matchup at some point in the tournament, and like they play a card that is not very good for the strategy of your deck. I mean, you obviously, if you play the de-evolution, I think there's a little cool plays that you could do. Especially with like Roxanne and de-evolving them. I mean, I think going forward, I might just play a Devo in the deck. It seems pretty good, especially for this matchup and the Charizard matchup. And it gives you a little bit more ways to play in this matchup. Obviously, if they utilize Cresselia pretty well, it could be a little tough. But I think for the most part, you're just going to be trying to attack into them and try and win the game by prize trading, and not getting unlucky off of Iono if they do play the Turo. And if they don't play the Turo, then you're just going to be like, cool, Mawile, GG's. And if they don't give you the Mawile, then you're just gonna try and blow up their board before they could really set up and start doing the normal Gardevoir things.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is you only run one Sableye, so it is really hard for you to set up multiple attackers, right? So maybe second Sableye could help that as well, but
100%.
Yeah, I mean, I think attacking, Sableye kill curliers, just like trying to get them to whiff Iono and stuff is a big way of how I think of how this is scary as the Gardevoir side. But yeah, generally a matchup like this is one of the matchups you're really hoping to see, Sablezard or something like that. So definitely a bad matchup, but playable to some extent. But the next matchup we're going to talk about is Roaring Moon. Okay, Roaring Moon. Just talk about Roaring Moon. I mean, you have the Kyogre, so the matchup's relatively straightforward, but how do you play against Roaring Moon?
Yeah, so Roaring Moon gets a little bit close depending on how your opponent plays, but if they don't play any hand disruption, this is the deck that you just get to play against, and you just get to utilize the full power of your deck, because you only need to take 2 prizes. Everything they attack with is a 2 prizer, unless they bench more Pico. And if they bench more Pico and they have Greninja, then you could just they're gonna most likely, if you play Rope, they're gonna most likely retreat in the Ninja, and then you could just Sableye clean up 2 and then take 4 with Kyogre later in the game. Where it gets really tricky is if they don't bench any of those low HP 2 prizers and they start attaching the booster capsules to their Roaring Moons. That's when you have to conserve the vacuum in this matchup. Because ultimately, majority of your win cons against this matchup is using Kyogre. Obviously, like I play against this as top 8 on stream. It was a very weird game. Like, all 3 games are very weird. I didn't really actually get to execute like what I normally do in the Roaring Moon matchup in any of the 3 games. But I mean, off stream, I hit Jose Marzan, and he was playing a Roaring Moon deck that didn't play as much disruption with no judge, and he just played Iono. So it was very easy to get the Kyogre play. You Dragonite them. They usually don't have a way to respond to it unless they play the Vitality Band. They're going to have to Frenzy Gouging themselves, which puts them at 30 HP left. And that just puts you in a really good spot to have a lot of time to win the game and put a lot of pressure on them to try and find all their pieces.
Yeah, fair. And so with Dragonite, are you going for Dragonite over Cramorant, like this, a sort of slower, like go Cramorant and then later on go back Sableye? Or what are you really trying to do if everything goes well?
So yeah, I mean, the Cramorant Sableye strategy is okay. They play Switch Cart, so it's like they can always heal off your cram damage, and it kind of doesn't really do the effect that you want. I think Dragonite's the most reliable attacker, because I'd say over 50% of the time, whenever you're trying to do the Kyogre thing in the game, you're gonna attack with Dragonite. Because like, you attack with Dragonite, and then it's like, cool, they either have to find Vitality Band, or they're just gonna Frenzy Gouging themselves. So if they Frenzy Gouging themselves, then boom, that's one Pokemon that's KOable. Then you only need one vacuum to try and find that last piece for Kyogre. And then you just have the entire game to dig through your deck. And they don't really have as much disruption. So if they're going to disrupt you, they're going to Iono you. And you have a lot more control of what you draw off of Iono compared to what you draw off of Judge. I mean, Judge is completely random. But Iono, you have a good idea of what you're going to draw into, especially later in the game. So you could like use Pal Pad, or you could just leave the deck the way it is. And like kind of determine what you're going to draw off that Iono, determining like if it's going to be a crucial Iono that they need to hit, or like if the Iono just does nothing to you, which majority of times, if you're playing correctly, the Iono shouldn't really do as much.
Sure. And also, I want to ask you how you think about Mew VMAX and Greninja in this matchup. So obviously, if they're playing Water Energy, you bench Manaphy, but you're benching Manaphy get like immediately, and are you like maybe avoiding benching Greninja, or are you just slamming Greninja on the board and then going Manaphy later? How do you think about that, and what are the sort of conditions for that?
I would say like don't slam Manaphy, because I mean, unless you have it in your hand, it's not really doing much, then like don't slam it, because like you're obviously just prioritizing digging in the matchup, because you want to get to the bottom of your deck as fast as possible. I would prefer them to show me the Water Energies before I know that they're in their deck, because like most Roaring Moon decks are not going to be playing Water Energies, because I personally think that it's bad. I mean, like, and majority of lists that did well this weekend did not play the Water Energies, just because the Water Energies, it's just one more thing you have to do in the deck. I don't actually know if it's correct or not, but like, I don't think, in my personal opinion, that's very good. And like, I didn't see as much throughout the weekend. And it doesn't even really trend. It doesn't seem to be trending in the way of Water Energies. It seems to be all Dark Energies. It's kind of like the move. So I would definitely hold off on benching the Manaphys until they show that they have the water energies, and then make them show the cross. And then they have Cross Switcher Cologne. That's cool. It's just another way for them to take a 2-prize knockout. But I mean, their deck usually gets a little bit more clunkier whenever they play those cards.
And then Mew EX.
And then the Mew EX is you definitely that's something to be afraid of, but I wouldn't like really be afraid of it until they start attaching energy to it. If they attach it, they have attached double energy switch, then like cool. Like you had to attach double energy switch in a boss. It's a lot that they need out of their hand just to get to KO2 70 HP or 90 HP Pokemon. But like sometimes it's like you can't afford to get them to take the 2-prize turn, especially if it's taking them like all those cards from their hand and they're not hand disrupting you. Because like you also have to factor that unless they play cross switchers or they flip heads up Pokemon catcher, they're not hand disrupting you if they do that. I do know that like a lot of lists are playing 4 catcher now. So maybe it's definitely correct to bench Manaphy, especially later in the game. But I think that like for sure prioritize drawing cards over everything in the matchup.
Fair enough. Cool. Yeah, you covered everything. So let's go to Miraidon. Iron Hands deck, basically just an Iron Hands deck that gets Kyogred. But how are you playing around? Dealing with Iron Hands early.
This is definitely one of your more scarier matchups. They're gonna always Iron Hands you like on the first turn, so you have to be really careful of that. Pretty much after they Iron Hands you, your response is Dragonite or bust. It's like you're gonna get the Dragonite, or you're probably losing the game. It's kind of like the same thing with Gardevoir, where they need that turn to knock it out with the Arcana, or else if they go down to 2, if the Miraidon player isn't like just attaches an energy to Flaffy or something, like they probably win the game because they're just favored. And they bench Mew EX. Like it's like they just gotta bench Mew EX. It feels kind of like the same matchup if you've ever played Gardevoir versus Miraidon. But it's just I feel like you have more options to get there. So you go Dragonite, ideally, which happens around 50% of games. You get to the Dragonite, you KO the Iron Hands, and then they have to go Miraidon and attack into your Dragonite with Zapdos. After that, if their bench isn't full, they have to go Iron Hands after the Miraidon, the Dragonite, and I think they win if they do that. If they do not do that, I think you're in a pretty good spot because you have 3 to 4 turns just to get to that Kyogre. You're going to be popping Pokestops as fast as you can. You're just going to be drawing. Like I like to bench 3 to 4 Comfeys in that matchup. You're drawing through your deck as fast as you can. You're trying to just get cards out of your deck as fast as you can. Usually you only need to Kyogre for 4 in that matchup, and you're drawing cards aggressively. You're playing aggressively. You're Pokestopping aggressively. If your Pokestop sticks around for 1 turn, another cool play that you could do in the matchup is use the Pokestop, vacuum it away, and use another Pokestop, and that mills essentially 6 cards in the turn. And like with mulligans and with like stuff like that, it's like getting to the bottom of your deck should be possible within 3 turns, if not 4, in that matchup. Like if you get a couple mulligans your way, I think you could actually do it in 3. And if not, I think 4 is very doable to get to the bottom. If you're just drawing as many cards as you can, plus thinning out with the Mirage Gates, Ball Search cards, Pokegear is a thinnable card from the deck. You have so many cards that could just milk cards from the deck and get your deck to that 0 card mark.
Yeah, fair. I mean, that's really all it comes down to in the Miraidon matchup. There isn't really all of
it's just
There is obviously the difference if you're playing against. I mean, Path variant has sort of been faded out by now, but if you are playing against a Path Judge version, does anything change? They're obviously hitting Iron Hands a lot less often, like almost never hitting the second Iron Hands. Did you do anything differently against them? Do you think it's worse, better?
I think it's worse if they hit it. Like if they hit the Iron Hands, it seems so much worse because they can judge you. At least in the Peony version, they're like designed to hit Iron Hands, right? But they're never going to be hand disrupting you. They have no hand disruption, so it's just like you're chilling the entire game. It's more dependent on what you do. I feel like in the Iron Hands matchup, the Path matchup with Path and Judge and stuff like that, it comes down to more of like what they can do in their deck. Just because their deck isn't as explosive as the other one, so you're not expecting everything to go their way. But definitely it seems a lot worse because they could Judge. Judge is definitely like one of the worst cards for your deck, just because it's pure variance when it comes down to. At least Iono, you have some control, and you kind of like can at least know before it happens. With Judge, it's like complete variance. You're just getting lucky or you're not. So it kind of comes down to yeah, I definitely would feel better playing into the Peony version rather than the Judge Path version.
Fair enough. I think that's it for Miraidon. The next matchup, we're not gonna have it for very long, but it's Mew VMAX. This matchup, Kyogre versus Mew VMAX, has been around for like over ages.
Yeah,
at this point.
this matchup's been the the talking point of the Pokemon TCG for almost 12 months now.
Yeah, exactly. How do you think you play it?
I mean, it doesn't really change that much. I mean, like everyone knows about Greninja Sableye. I mean, you Greninja Sableye. You now with the addition of Paradox Rift, you have counter catcher, so you could go Dragonite Catcher, which is another cool thing that you could do. And you have 5 draw supporters, including the Roxanne. So you have 4 Colress, Roxanne, Palpad. You're just trying to get to the bottom of your deck, getting through the judges, survive the judges. Bench as many Comfeys as you can. There's nothing they can do from punish you to bench Comfeys. I mean, it's kind of hard for them to play the game without benching their Pokemon. So you're just gonna kill a 2-prizer and then Kyogre for game and take 4 prizes. So that's like been the roadmap of the matchup, and I think it's still the same to this day.
Yeah, I think the main thing in this matchup is basically just take any KO you can get at the beginning. Like if it's Dragonite, if it's you have to Cramorant into Sableye, it's perfect. You can connect Cramorant into Genesect, that's great. Or if you just have to go Greninja into Sableye, just take literally whatever you can, and then you just go for Kyogre from there and just chill.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'd say Greninja Sableye is definitely the most common one. I'd also prefer not taking a Mew VMAX unless I have to, just because of the off chance that they play Roxanne. Because getting Roxanne to 2 feels really, really bad, especially against Mew VMAX, which is a deck that's going to always draw the cards that they need.
Yeah, for sure. And even Iona to 3 is like the 1 card difference. You feel it. I feel like
definitely does feel bad.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, super strength standard matchup. The next one is Lost Zone Box. There's so many versions of Lost Zone Box. So if you want to just maybe talk about similarities, and then maybe we can talk about specifics as well. So how do you play this? We can start actually with against a deck that does against the normal Lost Zone that doesn't play Jirachi, and then like with Jirachi, and then also Iron Hands is separate from them. So maybe starting off with against no Jirachi.
So I'd say that there's a lot. So you want to start off with kind of like Paradox Box with like no Jirachi.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe let's start with Iron Hands. You know, let's start with like Paradox Box,
Iron
Hands.
That's what I was gonna say. Like what Tim Franklin played in Australia, and like what Dean Nizam has been playing. Like that list. So I think that list is going to be a little bit tough just because they have the Iron Hands. But you have Jirachi and Manaphy, so I feel like naturally you're kind of fine into them. You can bench those guys and then use the Dragonite to respond to their Iron Hands. They just attack with a lot of 2-prizers, and as long as they're not attacking with Iron Hands, I feel like you're fine. You're just trying to prize trade. You can Roxanne them. I don't know actually if they play Roxanne. They probably do. So, I mean, set up multiple attackers if you ever get into that Roxanne range. Mostly in many Lost Box mirrors, the majority of the only thing you could really do whenever going into Roxanne range, unless you could avoid it, is set up the multiple attackers, just so you could at least survive 1 turn, guaranteed. Just gives you a little bit of insurance, and then like it comes down to a little less variance than you could have. But I mean, in the Lost Box mirror, it's kind of weird because you're not going to be seeing that many. But if you do, I think playing Jirachi and Manaphy is like the majority, like mostly the only thing you can do to make it better, unless you're going to commit to playing that thick Iron Hands Paradox Pokemon line in your deck. And then we could go over Sablezard if you want.
Go Sablezard.
Yeah. So I think Sablezard's going to be the most popular one for sure out of them. Because I think everyone kind of knows that the Paradox one, and like I don't really know about the super effective glasses, but we'll go over that one after Sablezard.
Yep.
I think Sablezard's definitely the most popular, just because it's kind of like Giratina. It's like a deck that's like very easy to pick up for people. Definitely, in my experiences, the deck hasn't felt that good to play, but it seems kind of straightforward. Like you don't have like a million lines of play like every other Lost Zone deck. So I kind of feel like in that matchup, they have a lot of Sableyes. They have Radiant Charizard. I mean, like you have Manaphy and Jirachi, and most Lost Box decks that don't. So as long as you get the first cram hit, I feel like you're fine. I like using Surf with Kyogre in the matchup because Kyogre has 130 HP. It's not knocked out by anything in the Sablezard deck other than Radiant Charizard. It's usually really good to use Kyogre and paired with a Roxanne. Since you play Manaphy and Jirachi, they can't really avoid the Roxanne range. So they're getting Roxanne and then they're getting surfed, and there's no way that they could one-shot your Kyogre in the next turn, and that Kyogre is going to take another prize because it also knocks out everything in the deck. So I mean, I think that like a lot of people don't really realize that Kyogre even has a second attack. But that second attack is extremely good against Sablezard. It is most likely the reason that you will be winning games against Sablezard.
Yeah, fair enough. And then even I'm just gonna talk about that matchup first, and then we'll move on to another. Do you think you're a lot of the time, when you're sort of just like behind one prize and you're sort of in this like Jirachi Manaphy where you can't do a whole lot? You trying to chase Manaphy, or is there anything else that you're trying to do? Maybe chase Jirachi, anything like that, or just kill attackers?
I'm definitely still chasing Manaphy just because Greninja versus Sableye, the debate is kind of like Greninja in total does 180 damage and Jirachi in total does 120. So obviously you're going to want the one with more damage output. So if you get rid of the Jirachi, it puts more pressure on them because you could also just Greninja the Jirachi plus anything else. And even if you're not even using the maximum damage output, killing two 70 HP Pokemon is 140 HP off the board, and Sableye does only 120 again. So it's just, and also like with the addition of Jirachi into the format, it's definitely just a lot better to get rid of that Manaphy first.
Yeah.
Before anything else.
And you are trying to chase that over attackers.
Yes, 100%. They don't really have any attacker that puts a significant amount of pressure on you, so I don't think that there's like any attacker that's more worth knocking out rather than just those support Pokemon. Because especially with the I think for sure if Jirachi wasn't in your deck, that like you go after the Sableye if that's out. But since Jirachi is a card in your deck, they can only knock out whatever is in the active spot. Also against Sablezard, you don't bench Manaphy. Because they have nothing that can threaten the bench. If they play a Delphox, they can show the Delphox game 1, cool, I'll bench Manaphy game 2. Like, sick, you play a Delphox in your deck. Not many people are going to be playing Delphox. And it's just, you don't have to devote a ton of bench space to those Pokemon either. Because, like, in certain matchups, you have to bench Manaphy and Jirachi. But in the Sablezard matchup, you only have to bench Jirachi. And it just feels really good.
Sure. And then we'll end it off talking about super effective glasses. It really just functions like a normal Paradox deck for the most part, but is there anything specific? They don't really run Manaphy, so anything specific that changes in that matchup?
Oh, they were in Manaphy.
Yeah, Magnus.
Yeah, so let me pull up Magnus's list real quick just to get a little reference. So yeah, I would say that this matchup seems really good in theory. If you drop a Manaphy against them, you're just going to be dropping Manaphy against them too, because if I see the super effective glasses, I'm also not going to assume that they play Sableye, because there's just a lot of different energy types that they have to play in the deck, like grass, lightning, dark, and if they play waters for some reason to attack with the green, I think you'd much rather be playing waters in the deck rather than playing with Sableye. But anyway, I definitely think that matchup seems good as long as you just drop the Manaphy, because you do want to drop the Manaphy, because if they play waters or if they play the Mew EX, they can attack with your Greninja, and if they ever Iron Hands you, you're gonna want to respond by using Dragonite. You can Roxanne them. I feel like Roxanne has to be really, really good against them. Also, preserving your Vacuum seems pretty good if they ever try and bench a V with a Forest Seal Stone to try and like make themselves a little Roxanne proof. There just would be no way that they can avoid Roxanne, and there's a way that you could avoid Roxanne every single game, right? Because you have Sableye, so you could just Sableye, spread around their board, Ninja a little bit, Dragonite their Iron Hands whenever it comes up, and paired with a Roxanne whenever you go down into your Roxanne turn, so you try and hope that they don't draw into their Roxanne. It definitely seems like a good matchup for sure from what I'm looking at.
Yeah, fair. I mean, the main thing is the Mew EX on Greninja. On your Greninja, I think so. Yeah, I bet you Manaphy.
Yeah,
definitely good. So I think that's all. Unless you have another Lost Zone deck that you want to talk about, this is literally infinite. But
yeah, I think there's so many of them. I don't really think that there's many more that we haven't talked about that like are worth bringing up. I mean, I think they're all kind of like they're all kind of just bad in their own right?
They all kind of end up being the same as well. Like it's just Jirachi, Manaphy, like whatever. I mean, Iron Hands. It's like these few cards that matter. So I think you can definitely take the information there and apply it to any Lost Zone deck. So the next matchup is Blocklax. Yeah, how do you play Blocklax generally?
So it's like I think that this is one that I'm personally the most confident in. If I'm gonna choose any deck in this video that I would like to play like a best of 5 for, like if my life was on the line, definitely play against Blocklax. Because the match is just so good. You can attack with Dragonite. They can Misfortune Sisters. They have to get really lucky off of Misfortune Sisters. You have 7 switch outs in your deck, plus the boss's orders if they ever have any Pokemon that isn't a Snorlax in play. Because they usually bench Rotom. So it's like, and also, most of them don't play Vacuum. So if you ever attach Force Seal Stone to Dragonite, that's an infinite out in your on your Pokemon whenever you want. Especially whenever you're getting low in the game where they're gonna be Ionoing you to less cards. Just having that one like little insurance package is kind of nice, especially on that Dragonite. So you're just gonna be mainly like, you hope to start Comfy. If you don't, kind of sucks, but you're gonna be just benching the Dragonite, attaching to it 3 times, switching in, just attacking 6 times and winning the game. I mean, they can score him a little bit, but it's like you're gonna be benching all your Comfies in the matchup. Hopefully you start Comfy and then you just bench a bunch of Comfies and then you bench like maybe a Cram or a Sableye and then like you have a Dragonite. That should be able to take care of all of their Pokemon, and they're gonna be gusting that one Pokemon that isn't Comfy the entire time. So I mean, if that one Pokemon that isn't Comfy is just an attacker, then they might even be gusting a Comfy. So it's like, I think that the matchup's pretty good. It's definitely a lot better to just fill your bench with Pokemon. If you can fill your bench, the quicker you fill your bench, the quicker Erica becomes a blank card in their hand.
Yeah. Exactly, and you don't want definitely the way you lose is use get Kyogre on the board for no reason, and then you have to deal with that. It's a bit massive pain. Yeah, I mean, Blocklax I think is very straightforward. So next matchup, Chien Pao. You said this is one of the few matchups you go first against. How do you play against Chien Pao? So
I'd say majority of Chien Pao lists aren't playing Manaphy at this moment. Just because there's like no real reason for them to, other than for my deck. So they do want to play a Manaphy. They're playing a Manaphy for pretty much my deck. So you want to go first against them because you want to get the Greninja before they can evolve into Baxcalibur. Because it forces them to bench 3 Frigibacks. The only way that they can avoid is by benching 3 Frigibacks. And if one of them are prized, then they can't do it. They bench the 3 Frigibacks, you KO 2, they evolve into 1 Bax, they can still play the game. If for any reason any of that goes wrong and you kill all of their Frigibacks, the game just pretty much ends on the spot. If you go second and you hit Greninja on your first turn, congratulations, you've won the game. I did that against my teammate Lucas Zing this weekend. In our winning in to winning in to winning in. Yeah, he hit 2 Frigibacks on his first turn, and he was like pass, and I went second, and I hit turn 1 Greninja. And I mean, with the 1 vacuum, it's probably not extremely high odds, but you're gonna be just gunning for that Greninja in the matchup. It's also sometimes good just to Greninja the backs twice and just knock it out. You just go Greninja once and then rod it back, Greninja again. Cool. Sableye is good in combination with Roxanne if there's only one Barrel in play. I think there's a lot of playability in the matchup. You have Manaphy too. Always bench Manaphy against them. You never want them taking multi-prize turns. If they play the Iron Hands, it gets a little tricky. But I think most lists have kind of given up on the Iron Hands thing because it's a little too clunky. I like the Chien Pao matchup is definitely another one of those favored matchups where you can just use your deck and there's not really anything preventing you from doing anything in the game.
Fair enough. Yeah, I have no questions on that. So we're going to move to the final matchup, Urshifu Inteleon. I think it's definitely complicated for sure. How do you play against Urshifu Inteleon?
Okay, so if they draw well, this one's 100% a wash. Like, this one is just one of those matchups where you just kind of like get an early lunch. I play against Alex Kreckler. I know he's one of the best Urshifu players like in existence. And this dude only plays Urshifu. So I was just like, all right, sick. Early lunch, cool. But I have played against the matchup a lot, and mainly the way that I have won this matchup is kind of by killing their Octillery early in the game and kind of just praying that they just don't draw what they need. They don't find their pieces. That's kind of like how most Lost in decks can be. Urshifu Inteleon is kind of just by crippling their setup. Because the deck is very fragile, and it doesn't really draw that well, because it has no like strict draw engine.
It's kinda
So
shit.
if you get rid of that Octillery like off the start, they can brick a lot. But other than that, if they're just drawing everything they need, they always find their supporter for turn, and they're getting the double gunners out, and they're about to Urshifu you. They could double gunner away your Manaphy and your Jirachi. It's definitely one of your most unfavored matchups, and they usually play a Professor Turo and an Escape Rope, so Mawile doesn't really come up that much. So it's definitely one of those matchups that you just try and hope that they don't draw as well as they normally do, and you could choose out a win that way.
Yeah. And so, what are the exact prizes you're taking? So after you kill the Octillery, like you get first prize on Octillery. How are you trying to like Dragonite chase down 2 prizes immediately, or are you sort of going Cramorant and just hope they don't evolve everything to get the last 5, or how do you think that you try and take the prizes?
I'm like really hoping that I could somehow get to the bottom of my deck and just Kyogre them. There's not really much like you can do, because if you Dragonite them, it gets them so much closer to just being able to wipe your board, because their goal against you is to also just not get Roxanne. So they're just gonna wipe your board. Benching Dragonite, benching a 2-prizer feels really bad, because like it gives them a way just to take a multi-prize, like take a 4-prize turn. I mean, I think that it's really hard. It's harder for them to take a 4-prize turn with like just other Pokemon in play. Especially with attacking, it just completely decimates your bench when it comes to the damage, and it helps them out. Especially with the Radiant Alakazam, Double Gunner. They have Urshifu. It's just they have so many ways to just take multi-prize turns against you. If they draw what they need, it's just really hard to get through it. But if you do get through it and you get to that Kyogre turn, I think like every time that you get to the Kyogre turn, you win. It's just getting there is really difficult, because they can just like end the game so quickly.
Fair enough. Cool. Well, I have nothing else for the matchup, guys. That was the final matchup. So thank you, Aidan, so much for coming on and talking about Lost Zone. Very insightful. You can shout yourself out anywhere if you anywhere you want to shout yourself out. Go ahead.
Yeah. Shout out my Medify. I do coaching. I have a class coming up on Wednesday, a week from today when we're recording this, the 14th. It's about the Lost Zone, kind of like what you saw today, but it will go more in depth, and I'll have a little Q&A session at the end for anyone who's a part of the class. Shout out my Twitter, Khus Aidan, and shout out my team, the Daily Grind.
Cool. Perfect. Thanks so much, Aidan.